Now let's begin the lecture. The first issue we'll talk about is the issue of killing. This is a relatively sensitive issue. All cultivators of orthodox ways are absolutely forbidden to kill. Whatever ordinary people do, we don't care. It's impossible that everybody will come to cultivate Falun Gong. We only talk about how cultivators should act. Why is it that throughout history, a lot of cultivation schools have taught the issue of killing so seriously and all forbid killing? Because religions taught that killing can generate karma or ye. Killing can generate a lot of sinful karma for oneself. Then one would not be able to practice cultivation anymore. Actually, as we have said, people have come to the stage with karma rolling on top of karma. It's already very dangerous. However, I've also said that seeing that man still has Buddha nature left, we have taught the Buddhist Fa one last time. Of course, when I began doing this thing, others were saying, mankind has already come to this stage and yet you still bring out this Fa. The implication being that mankind's morality is now already very corrupt, and the karma is huge. In the past, in the original Buddhism, killing referred mostly to killing human beings. That was the most serious. If one had killed a human being, then this person would no longer be able to practice cultivation. In the course of the development of Buddhism, the killing of large livestock also came to be taken very seriously. Eventually, as Mahayana Buddhism developed to the present day, small lives also came to be considered very important. Finally, in the course of development, some monks have gone to the extreme. They're even afraid of squashing an ant or a bug while walking. So they walk with skipping steps. They look to make sure there's nothing on the ground and only then take a step. I say it's very tiring to live like that. You know, when we practice cultivation, we should cultivate in an open and dignified manner. We don't intentionally hurt any living beings, but we human beings should have a human living environment and way of living. When it's unintentional, or when you step on some insects on the road, I think that's because in the world of organisms, there is also the issue of ecological balance. Maybe its life was coming to an end, and it was supposed to die. Maybe it's like that. Because as I've said, we don't intentionally hurt any living beings, but we're supposed to have our way of life, our living environment, and conditions for living. We must not be an overcautious gentleman and go to the other extreme. That would also be an attachment. Isn't that an attachment? A strong attachment, I'd say. If you were to base it on that logic, the moment you put your foot down, you haven't squashed any bugs or ants, but on the microscopic level, how many microorganisms and much, much smaller insects have you squashed? Countless numbers. So is that killing? That is to say, we cannot view these issues like that. All we should do is cultivate properly, cultivate nobly and in our own full right, begin with the big picture, and raise ourselves up. We shouldn't go to any extremes. So why is the issue of killing taken so seriously? In religions, they have their way of explaining it. Here, we'll tell you about it from the situation as we see it now, the real situation. The seriousness of killing lies in two aspects. One is, we've discovered that when a person is born, there is one of you born in many, many dimensions. They look the same as you and are called the same name. And what they do in their lifetime is generally about the same. Of course, there are some differences in minor aspects, but overall it's about the same. Within a certain range in all of the dimensions of the universe, there's one of you born. I say a human being is a very complex being. Their connection with you is similar to the scientific diagrams of molecules, whereby one ball is linked to another by a line. One ball is linked to another with bonds crisscrossing in all directions. It's a bit similar to those connections, and you are the center. However, at the same time, they are independently existing living beings, yet all of them are also you. In a certain sense, this can be called your whole integrated being. Then there is a problem here. If, within all this, there is one of you, or if there is one living being that has not completed his whole course of life, and suddenly dies halfway. Either he was killed or he died as a result of some natural or man-made disaster. It would give rise to a very dangerous situation. Namely, this being that has died will have no place to go. Why does he have no place to go? Because the entire being that his life belongs to has to wait until all of them complete their course of life. And only then can they go together in search of their final destination. So the one among them who has died has no place to go and has to continue waiting. And that kind of waiting is really miserable. In the past, monks talked about raising souls from suffering into the next world. Actually, the real meaning of raising souls is to raise these people up, homeless souls and hungry ghosts who have no place to go. That's what religions say, but as we see, he has indeed fallen into a state of great suffering. So he'll really hate the person who harmed his life. And throughout this period of time in his life, he will continue to hate. His mind will be producing karma, constantly producing clumps of karma in the air and pushing them onto the person who has harmed his life. So the killer will be constantly accumulating karma. Moreover, killing in and of itself will generate a lot of karma. It puts a living being into a state of great suffering, and for a very long period of time. So this is one of the aspects of its seriousness. We have seen that that's really the way it is. There is also another situation. Because a person's lifetime, either when he's born or when he has completed his lifespan, as I said, when a person is born, one can see the existence of his entire life. Then is the existence of his life formed naturally, or is it arranged by someone? Regardless, it is not accidental. If his lifetime is indeed arranged by someone, then it's not only his life. All people have to come to this society and do all kinds of work. How they complete the course of their entire life, what kind of social relations occur between them, all these things are balanced and arranged. If one living being has died, then the social order arranged by higher beings will have been disrupted. Because one has connections with others through his work, the things that he produces will benefit others. Anyway, there are social connections in various aspects. Basically, all those social connections will have been disrupted. So after this person kills someone, even that higher being will not forgive him. So think about it. Can this person still practice cultivation? It's that serious. In the past, those cultivators of the worldly small ways, their masters were not high level. Once such a person killed someone, even his master would be in trouble. That's the reasoning. So the issue of killing, as we see it, is indeed very serious. It also involves the issue of compassion. Especially in the cultivation of the Buddhist school, one has to pay attention to compassion. Without compassion, one cannot offer salvation to all sentient beings. Then doesn't killing show a lack of compassion? Doesn't it also involve the issue of compassion? Behind everything lies a karmic relationship, regardless of what you may think. Maybe you owed something to others in the past, so they've come to hurt you. That may be the case. Of course, doing bad deeds, if a person is intent on wrongdoing, then he's just out of control. In so doing, he generates karma. This is the situation we have seen. So we talk about this issue to everyone, and it's extremely serious. Moreover, we've discovered that the lives of a lot of living beings are the same as that of human beings. If what Buddhism teaches about the 6 paths of reincarnation is true, then what's the difference between the lives of other animals and the spirit of a human being? Of course, if there's time, I'll give you examples of these things using modern scientific discoveries. So we have brought up this issue, and it's a very serious issue. If you want to practice cultivation in Falun Dafa, then you cannot kill anymore. Of course, we're in the south here, especially in the summer. If you don't eat something while it's fresh, it's going to stink and rot very soon. Anyway, what we're doing is teaching the Fa to practitioners. We are not telling ordinary people how to live well. How should this issue be handled? I think, well, everyone should decide this matter for themselves. Speaking of killing, as I just said, we must not become overcautious gentlemen about trivial matters, like being afraid of squashing an ant while walking. If you look at it that way, since everything we eat is alive, we should all tie up our necks and stop eating and drinking. Then how could we practice cultivation? So we cannot do that. Some people may also ask, what about flies and mosquitoes? There are lots of mosquitoes in the south. What should we do? They bite people all year round. And flies are filthy. You're a practitioner, so you're not afraid of disease, but what about children? Flies can bring germs. I say that's easy to deal with. You can drive them out. Driving out flies is no problem. Of course, those mosquitoes are hard to drive out. They stay still in dark places. When you try to drive them out, they don't move, and then at night they come out again and bite you. I think this should be handled as follows. I said that human beings should have a human living environment, a human living space, a human way of life. If a mosquito bites people and you slap it, if you kill it, then you kill it. Because as a practitioner, you are not afraid of it. But if children in your family were to get bitten, it would be so great. What if they caught a contagious disease? There is such a problem. So if you killed it, then you killed it. However, we're not hurting living beings for no reason. But this is just limited to these kinds of things. In the case of other beings, if you were to kill someone just because he annoys you, that's not allowed. I can also give you an example. There is the following story. From 2,500 years ago, when Sakyamuni was teaching the Dharma in ancient India. One day Sakyamuni wanted to take a bath. This was in the forest, so the conditions were very poor. He told one of his junior disciples to clean the bathtub for him. Of course, the bathtub was, I think, probably not like the modern ones. Maybe it was made of stone and not very smooth. So his disciple went to clean the bathtub for him, but found it full of insects. Since it was a stone bathtub, there were insects crawling all over it, and it was hard to get them out. That junior disciple saw that if he were to try to get the bugs out, then he might kill them. So he turned right back around. There was nothing he could do. Wouldn't that be killing? So he came back and said to Sakyamuni, Venerable Master, there are bugs crawling all over the bathtub. Meaning to say, if I start cleaning it, the bugs will be killed. Sakyamuni did not look at him, but said just one sentence. He told him again, "Go clean the bathtub." Sakyamuni gave the order, so he went, but then he turned around and came back again. He thought that maybe Sakyamuni hadn't understood what he had said, so he said, "Venerable Master, the bathtub is full of bugs. If I begin to clean the bathtub, I will kill them." Seeing that the disciple hadn't enlightened to it, Sakyamuni said, "It's the bathtub that I wanted you to clean." The disciple suddenly enlightened to it. He then cleaned out the bathtub and Sakyamuni took a bath. That is to say, we cannot stop walking just because there are insects on the ground, and we cannot stop taking baths because there are bugs in the bathtub. Vegetables and grains are living beings, so should we even tie up our necks? That wouldn't do. As human beings, this is just the way they live. The killing that we are talking about. In the past, large living beings were always considered very important. Small living beings are also taken very seriously, so we try our best to avoid killing, to avoid doing such things. We have to maintain our living environment, and that isn't wrong either. By the way, speaking of this, let me mention that there are some sham Qigong and fake Qigong masters who also talk about the issue of killing. But what do they say? They say it is allowed to kill on the 1st and 15th day of the month in the Chinese lunar calendar. And some also say that it's all right to kill those with 2 legs. So those with 2 legs aren't living beings? And killing people isn't committing a sin on the 1st and the 15th? Whether a Qigong master is genuine or fake, from the words that come from his mouth, you can tell whether he's evil or righteous. Speaking of the issue of killing, let us also talk about eating meat. Some people ask, does eating meat count as killing? Eating meat does not count as killing. How could it? You are not the one who killed it. You just have an attachment to meat. Speaking of eating meat, let's first talk about the issue of attachments. Meat is very tasty, and eating it is addictive. So some people have no appetite if there's no meat. They don't feel like eating a meal without meat. Why? Because it's very tasty. It's addictive, so people want to eat it. Of course, for the people attending the seminar, I didn't tell everyone that you shouldn't eat meat from now on. I didn't say that. We have our way of dealing with it. First, we'll talk about eating meat. Eating meat is a very strong attachment. Practicing cultivation requires giving up this attachment, giving it up. Think about it. I just said it was an attachment. When I was teaching a seminar in the Northeast, there were 3 people walking out of the park. It was morning. I was passing by the park gate, and those 3 people were coming out of the park speaking loudly to each other. One of them said, "Who would practice a Qigong system that requires that you can't eat meat? Even if I had to give up 10 years of my life, I'd still eat meat." He would give up 10 years of his life to eat meat. Think of how strong an attachment to meat that is. He would give up his life for it. Then should such a strong attachment be given up? Then yes, it should be given up. So the main purpose of not letting you eat meat is to get you to give up this attachment, an attachment that ordinary people cannot give up. We're teaching the Fa. In his time, Sakyamuni was teaching according to the requirements of his school. He didn't teach the general principles of the Fa. Actually, the true meaning behind not letting you eat meat is to have you give up all different kinds of attachments. And it's not just limited to meat. Suppose you say, "I just love to eat this kind of food. I just love to eat that kind of food." All of these are attachments. They all have to be eliminated. But how do we handle this issue in our school? Everything in our system, we emphasize that the Fa refines the practitioner, which is also called the Gong refines the practitioner. When you aren't practicing, the Gong is refining you. So a lot of states arise out of your Gong. As some people practice, they weep. As some people practice, this state appears. For others, that state appears. And as some people practice, they become unable to eat meat. Why? Because in our Gong, there's a thing that eliminates your attachment to meat. So you yourself don't have to artificially say, I'll stop eating meat from now on. Of course, for those of us who didn't eat meat before, continue that way. That's okay. Now we're talking about our average cultivators. I didn't tell you to stop eating meat, but you may find that as you go on practicing our 法轮大法, you find that one day you suddenly cannot eat meat. When you smell meat, it stinks. And if you eat it, you'll want to throw up. You'll get nauseous. It's guaranteed to be this way. Of course, people are different. There are people who normally can finish a whole bowl of meat. Such a person's desire is very strong, but at his present level, that thing that will eliminate his attachment is not yet strong enough. So while he also finds meat unappetizing, he can still eat it. But once he does, he'll have a stomachache. That's also telling him that he cannot eat it anymore. So does this mean that from now on we'll have no affinity for meat, that we'll never be able to eat meat again? No, it doesn't. In our system, the main purpose of one's cultivation practice is not to have you give up anything materially. The main purpose is to have you give up your ordinary human attachments, the things you cannot let go of. So when this attachment has been given up, you may find that one day you can eat meat again. It doesn't stink, and when you pick it up and taste it, it's okay. Then you can eat it, no problem. If you can eat it, go ahead. If you become unable to eat it, you just naturally can't. When you can eat it again, it's because your attachment has been eliminated. And when you can eat meat again, you'll find that it's not tasty anymore. When they cook it at home, you eat with them, and when they don't, you don't think about it. So this attachment is gone. The goal has been achieved, and we don't care if you eat meat from that point on. But practicing cultivation among ordinary people is complicated, and you never know when this attachment of yours will arise again. If they always cook meat in your family and you always smell it, you may get addicted once again. So this situation may be repeated many times. Suddenly, someday, you may not be able to eat meat again, and after a while, after that attachment has been eliminated, you'll be able to eat it again. Of course, in our system, the duration is usually quite short. Usually it's about 2 months. Some people it passes in just 1 or 2 weeks because normally they're not too attached to meat. It passes very quickly. Some people it has to last for a while, but it doesn't exceed half a year at most. In the usual cases, it doesn't exceed half a year. In most cases, it's within 1 or 2 months that this attachment is eliminated, and then it's fine. This is what we teach regarding the issue of eating meat. In the original Buddhism, they did not talk about abstention from meat. When Sakyamuni was leading his disciples and teaching the Dharma in the early period, there was no precept or rule for abstention from meat. Now meat is considered a taboo food. It is forbidden by the precepts. Actually, I say, Buddhism today is a reformed Buddhism, because when Sakyamuni established Buddhism, there were no precepts against eating meat. He did advocate eliminating the human attachment to various foods and to being picky, but he did not single out meat. As I just said, it is unacceptable to you to have an attachment to anything. If you like to eat some particular food, you will find that one day you suddenly feel nauseous as soon as you see that food, or your stomach feels very acidic and you can't eat it. This is to eliminate your attachment. This can happen for other foods as well. When Sakyamuni was teaching the Dharma in the early years, when he was teaching his things in India, why didn't he teach abstention from meat? Because in those times, the population of the world was not very large yet. Many regions were quite undeveloped, and the area of farmland in the whole world was very limited, and the land was covered with forests and lakes. Grain was thus very scarce. In addition, many of the people who just emerged from the primitive society lived a nomadic life, or even relied on hunting for food. Therefore, at that time, in some areas, meat was the primary part of the diet. Food was very limited, and there was no room for being fussy. Why did Sakyamuni take his disciples to go begging for food? The purpose was to make the monks have none of the ordinary people's desires. Human beings cannot let go of money. I won't let you touch money. I'll make you leave your home. People like this thing or that thing. I won't let you have any of these things. I'll let you have nothing but one begging bowl, and force you to let go of various attachments. Of course, human attachments, it's very hard for a human being to practice cultivation. Their attachments can show up at any time. Thus, as time went on, some monks started comparing the begging bowls. Look at how the stone of mine is carved. It looks really good. Then he says, mine looks good. And some people would say, mine is silver, mine is copper, mine is jade. So they started comparing the begging bowls. And some started to collect begging bowls, saying, I got a good one, I'll keep it. I'll keep a few begging bowls. Sakyamuni saw this and gave everyone a Dharma lecture focusing on the subject of these begging bowls. He said, do not be attached to these things. If you want to be attached to these things, go back home. There are plenty of good things in your homes. Go collect them. Why would you treasure a begging bowl? So he gave a Dharma lecture just on the subject of these begging bowls. At the time, as I said, the cultivation way by which Sakyamuni was leading his disciples was aimed at maximally eliminating attachments. Then in doing this, monks naturally didn't farm, didn't do business or labor. Thus, the source of food became a problem. So he led his disciples to go begging for food, begging for alms. In those times, grain and other food were very scarce. People would give you whatever they were eating, or even their leftovers. In a lot of regions, they mostly ate meat. When they were done eating, if there was a bit left, they'd give it to you. You don't want it? It was even hard to get one meal a day. And the land was sparsely populated. That being the case, he did not prohibit eating meat. There was no precept against eating meat. But in those times, there were also prohibited or taboo foods. Why did he make certain foods taboo? The taboo foods he was referring to were not meat. Now they've come to call meat a taboo food. You know, the Dharma of Sakyamuni can be summarized in 3 words: precept, concentration, wisdom. The precepts, or commandments for abstention, were for reaching concentration, and concentration was the core of their school, which is also to say they had to sit in meditation and truly cultivate. Look at how nowadays monks seem to take scripture reading as the main task. Well, having a scripture reading as the main task is fine too, but you also have to cultivate. And they don't. A lot of monks don't even read the scriptures much. 3 meals a day, then hit the hay. In the meditation rooms, you see a thick layer of dust on the meditation benches because nobody sits on them. You have to sit in meditation and actually cultivate, but no one is cultivating. Back in those times, the actual cultivation was practiced all day long. You sat in meditation day and night. It was the main part. Now they don't do it anymore. Then since it was one of the main aspects of raising one's level, if somebody interfered with you while you were sitting in meditation, it was considered to be the most damaging. If a monk ate things like onions, ginger, or garlic, the strong smell would disturb others so they could not enter into tranquility, lest they could not cultivate, because in those days monks sat in meditation in circles of 8 or 10 people, in a forest or in a cave. But with such a strong smell, could others enter tranquility? So in those days, it was explicitly stipulated that onions, ginger, and garlic were taboo and were not to be eaten. That's where the monk's taboo on onions, ginger, and garlic comes from. Actually, once these things have been cooked, they don't smell anymore. Then there is no such problem. So it was forbidden to eat raw onions, ginger, or garlic. By the time it came to China, it had already been reformed into Mahayana Buddhism in India, and the precepts had multiplied. The requirements were for attaining the cultivation of Bodhisattva fa or even Buddha fa. As such, the demands of the precepts got higher, including making meat a taboo food, establishing a prohibition against eating meat. That's how it happened. Just now I discussed eating meat and the reasons behind it. You know, there have been many monks who have reached a high level in cultivation and discovered that eating or not eating meat is not the main thing at all. Some people, especially in Guangdong province and in Southeast Asia, have the following expression. If you ask them, are you cultivating Buddha? Then, as though these words are old-fashioned, they don't say they're cultivating Buddha. They say, my family is vegetarian. The implication being, I am cultivating Buddha. They take being vegetarian to be equivalent to cultivating Buddha, but it's far from it. If you don't eat meat, you've just given up an attachment on that one point of meat. But man's attachments are too many. As I said, showing off, jealousy, all kinds of mentalities. They're extremely numerous. For you to give up this one attachment counts as cultivation of Buddha? I say far from it. It cannot represent cultivation of Buddhahood. It's the Dharma ending period, so they've become confused. They think that if they don't eat meat, they can attain Buddhahood, but that won't work. If your Xingxin doesn't get raised up, don't even mention not eating meat. Even if you were to fast, you still wouldn't succeed. That's how it is. You must truly raise yourself up. You have to put it into practice among ordinary people, in this most complicated environment, in the school of hard knocks. That's the only way you can move up in cultivation and get rid of all the bad things that human beings have. Just now, I talked about how we regard the issue of eating meat in Falun Gong. Thus, we don't artificially force you. Of course, prior to this, some people had already abstained from meat. They just continue that way. Actually, when you reach a very high level in cultivation, you do have to do that. But for myself, maybe some people will ask, what does the teacher eat? I eat everything. But I don't eat those poisonous snakes and other messed up things. I eat the usual meals, and if there's meat in it, I can eat it like everyone else, but I'm not attached to it. If it's there, I eat it until I'm full, and that's it. The main consideration is that I came out to spread the Fa. I have to do this. I cannot avoid a lot of social activities, such as receptions and those kinds of things. When Sakyamuni was spreading the Dharma in his time, he also ran into these issues. Speaking of eating meat, let's talk about drinking alcohol and smoking, because all these are human addictions, and addictions are attachments. If you're addicted, then you're attached. You cannot give it up. In the past, in religions, they said that drinking alcohol can mess up one's nature, and if your nature is messed up, wouldn't it all be messed up? How can you practice cultivation? Also, in the Taoist school, they used to say that drinking alcohol blocks the energy channels. Of course, whether or not this is true, we won't talk about it, but we feel that what we have seen is that all the things developed through cultivation in your body, especially those of the Buddhist school, are annoyed by the smell of alcohol. They really dislike the smell of alcohol. When you drink alcohol, all the living beings in your body, including your gong, will leave your body. They won't stay on your body. The smell is very strong. So I'm urging you, it's better if you don't drink. But what about unavoidable social activities like receptions? Now, especially here in the South, with the reforms and opening up, nobody's going to force you. They ask you what you would like to drink. You get a soft drink, you get a Sprite, you get a mineral water, he gets a beer. I'd say it's whatever you want. If you really refuse to drink, I don't think anybody's going to force you. This drinking, people who don't practice cultivation say that drinking a little alcohol can invigorate blood circulation and that it seems to have some health benefits. That's an ordinary person saying. But as a practitioner, what circulation are you invigorating? Do you need to have that to invigorate your blood circulation? Next, let's talk about smoking. This smoking, people say drinking wine can, for ordinary people, drinking alcohol can invigorate the body, and for the elderly, drinking a little bit can dispel the chill. At least there's such a saying. At least in Chinese medicine, they have medicinal wines. By the way, here let's mention something. In the Taoist school, those that cultivate the great Tao, there's one kind of Da Tao or great Tao, and not every system is like this, but some schools do emphasize drinking. They don't stop until they're drunk. And after they get drunk, they sleep and won't wake up for a few days, or a few months, or even a few years. Why do they do this? I'm telling you, it's not that they have an attachment that's making them do this. It's because they're not cultivating that person, but his paraspirit, his paraconsciousness. They use alcohol to make him unconscious, and only then can that person cultivate. It's really pitiful. Many people know that throughout history, many immortals were very good at sleeping, and they admire them. I'm telling you, they're really pathetic. They themselves don't even know who's cultivating. Only at the very last step will they understand. Of course, of the Father we're teaching today, there are many things that are not to be made known to people. You know, when the Dharma of Sakyamuni was being transmitted, a lot depended on enlightening to things, but today we have discussed it very clearly. But we are doing this thing in accordance with the current, very special period of history. If you were to teach that Dharma the way it was done before, people aren't going to listen. It's even harder for present-day people to be enlightened. Even if it's being said, they won't necessarily live up to it. Some people still come up with messed-up questions. Of course, enlightenment quality differs from person to person. Let's come back to discussing smoking. People say drinking alcohol has a little bit of a benefit for ordinary people, but smoking does not have the least bit of benefit for people. Some people say, when there was a campaign against smoking, some smokers started saying that smoking can help the brain rest, or can relax the nervous system, or it's good for mental work. I say, this is deluding oneself and misleading others. Smoking can do nothing to refresh your brain or to let you obtain any benefit. On the contrary, it does damage to you. Then why do some people feel rested after smoking? Why is there that feeling? As I said, it's all in your mind. It's self-delusion. You think it is so, you believe it is so. So your mind has such an effect. At the same time, it's not that you smoked a cigarette and as a result, you began to feel better. It's that while you were smoking, you weren't doing anything. You were sitting there resting, which allowed you to relax. It's not smoking that made you more rested. So smoking doesn't do you any good. You know, as practitioners, we also have to purify our bodies, keep purifying our bodies, constantly purify our bodies, and make breakthroughs toward high levels. And people with illnesses have to purify their body and make it free from illness. We're constantly helping you to purify your body, and the Gong is playing this role. And then you go pour in black stuff bucket by bucket. You know, nowadays, when they say you shouldn't smoke, they say it's bad for your health. And when they're educating people about the effects of smoking, they give many examples. Upon dissection, it's discovered that the trachea, branch trachea, air passages, and even the lungs of long-term smokers are all black. Even the esophagus is black. All the air passages are black. What they say is very true. After dissection, it's all out there for everyone to see. It's all black. Of course it's black. You know, in the Northerners know that when chimneys are used for a long time, you have to clean them, otherwise they'll get clogged. Yours don't get cleaned, and black stuff is constantly being driven in there. Of course it's going to get all black, right? In addition, as practitioners, you have to be constantly purified, yet you're always polluting yourself. Aren't you working against what we are doing? So I'm saying, if you truly want to practice Gong, then quit smoking. Have you ever seen a Buddhist or a Taoist cultivator or a temple statue of a Buddha sitting there with a cigarette? Some people cannot quit. You say, I can't quit. The main reason is that you don't have the willpower. You don't want to quit. Your addiction is too strong. Of course, without any motivation, it seems very hard for you to quit. I'm telling you, if you want to cultivate, quit from now on. The good news is that as I've been talking about smoking today, I've been sending out something whereby if you smoke again, you'll find the flavor of tobacco very unpleasant. You'll have a bad taste in your mouth. So your addiction will become much weaker. So quit from now on. Now is the chance. If you don't quit now, there won't be another chance like this. Just now, we talked about the issues of killing and eating meat. Next, let's talk about jealousy. This thing is very serious. We have to single it out for discussion. We have to single it out. It cannot be left unspoken. You know, when I discuss Xing, I always spoke in general. I hadn't singled out any specific attachment for discussion. But we have to single out jealousy. Why? Because it has the strongest expression among people of today, among modern people. When people do bad things, a lot of it is caused by jealousy. A lot of people have made their body ill, they cannot sleep well, nor can they eat well, and that's also caused by jealousy. It's causing serious interference to our present-day people. So let's look for its origins, how this arises. You know, we Chinese are very introverted. Foreigners, that is Westerners, find it strange. How come Chinese people are like this? Regardless of whether something is good or bad, they never say it. It's clearly one way, but they say it's another. Actually, it's modesty, but they don't understand it because they're very extroverted. What is. Chinese people are not like that. You're not able to tell whether they're happy or angry. Of course, being well-bred and being very modest is a good thing, but it will also bring with it a bad aspect. We should view things from both sides. We should view things dialectically. This introversion comes from Chinese Confucianism, which teaches self-restraint, subtlety, and not revealing one's strengths. Mankind today, in the Dharma ending period, be it within Confucianism or Taoism or Buddhism or Catholicism and Protestantism, how many people can act in accordance with their requirements? That is to say, there is no fa left in their hearts to maintain a standard. The end of the Dharma has arrived. Then when such a time has come, once man goes out of control, something like our Chinese introverted character can lead to intense jealousy. Just now I said foreigners are extroverted. Let me give an example. Let's take a foreigner. When he's happy, you can see it. If he's angry, you can also see it. And in a little while, when he's cooled off, you can see it again. All these things are expressed, and he thinks that's the way it is. He doesn't emphasize things like modesty and such. He thinks one should be realistic. But Chinese people don't think this way, so the differences are huge. Chinese people are quite introverted, while Westerners are quite extroverted, so that can be outwardly expressed. For example, working in a foreign country, if you do a good job, the boss is happy and gives you a bonus. He gives you more money. The foreigner is very extroverted. He's really happy. He counts the money in front of everyone, bill by bill, saying, "Yeah, the boss gave me so much money." And then he'll put it in his pocket and walk away. He doesn't hide it from anyone. But a Chinese person wouldn't. If you do a good job and your boss or supervisor gives you a bonus, you'll stealthily take the money, quickly put it away. You don't want others to know. Why? Because others will be jealous. Even your good friends won't be able to get over it. They'll start saying, "Come on, treat us to dinner, take us out." They'll make you go. So these two different kinds of ideas will lead to two different sets of consequences. In a foreign country, if a kid scores 100 at school, he'll be ecstatic. He'll run home carrying the exam paper in his hand, yelling, "I scored 100! I scored 100!" hopping and skipping all the way home. His neighbors may open their windows and say, "Hey, Tom, good job." And that one says, "All right, Jack, score one next time too." The neighbors are sharing his joy. But if that happened in China, it would be bad news. The student gets 100 and ecstatically runs home. "I got 100! I got 100! The neighbors on the street, before any windows or doors are even open, they would start to curse inside their homes. "What's there to brag about? So you scored 100. What's the big deal? Who hasn't scored 100 points?" So different ideas lead to different consequences. Actually, this is a manifestation of an attachment. It's just jealousy. This jealousy makes interpersonal relations very tense. People disrespect each other and stab each other in the back. Foreigners don't understand. They say, you Chinese people fight amongst yourselves and make trouble for yourselves. People who've been abroad know that foreigners say, how come you Chinese are so incohesive? He makes trouble for him, she makes trouble for her. Say a person gets hired and is doing a good job. Soon there'll be someone stirring things up and saying bad things about him. This is to say our people. So jealousy is disturbing our present-day people quite severely. The same goes for cultivators. You've just begun on this path of cultivation. So you also have a lot of shortcomings in this respect, a lot of jealousy that you have to get rid of. Why do I bring up this issue so seriously? Because there's a rule set in stone, that if you do not get rid of jealousy, you will never attain the right fruit or 正果. No matter how well you've cultivated in other respects, you will not be allowed to succeed. So this issue is very serious. Even among practitioners, it also manifests itself quite strongly. Ordinary people have mutual disrespect, causing a lot of factors that lead to lack of unity, and they feel unbalanced in their hearts. Why do they feel unbalanced in their hearts? Mainly because they're thinking, you have 2 arms and a head on your shoulders, and I have 2 arms and a head on my shoulders. Why should you gain more than I? Of course, even though it's the same job, the reward is different. Because on the surface it seems to depend on whether one is doing a good job or a poor job, on how well one works, but actually, it's caused by one's inborn quality. Some years ago, when absolute egalitarianism was popular, it was said that all people are born the same, and it's postnatal things that change people. I say those words are too absolute. Then how come there are males and females? And how come now some babies are born with illness? Now it's even more bizarre. Some are born with hair, with teeth, or they can talk. There are all kinds. So it's not the same in all situations. They say postnatal things change a person. I say that may not be the case because his life has been arranged that way long ago. How can it be the same? When he goes through his life, he just goes according to his prearranged path of life. Then if he doesn't have these things in his life, can he get them by force? He cannot, so he gets jealous. He can't eat well, can't sleep well, he ruins his health, and by the time he's old, he becomes pessimistic, disappointed, bitter and unbalanced, and suffers from all sorts of illnesses, completely dejected from his failures. It's because he cannot see this principle. It's like the principle I spoke about before. You see a person who is good for nothing. In the factory, he appears very inept, whereas you do everything well and everybody compliments you. Or you are in the same office and whatever he does doesn't turn out well, and whatever you do looks good. But he's the one who gets promoted to be an executive, and he even becomes your boss. So you get unbalanced in your heart and go around complaining. Human beings don't understand this point. Even though he's completely incompetent, he has it in his life. You're incompetent, but you don't have it in your life, right? So no matter how hard you try, it won't work. Unless you commit major wrongdoings to take things away from other people that you were not supposed to get. In that case, you would have generated a lot of karma. Ordinary people cannot see this level of the principle, so by the time they get old, they've got nothing and have become disappointed and dejected. Even at an old age, they still cannot give up this attachment, and they lead a tiring life. They're confused and don't know how to live. Of course, our lecture is for practitioners. This is the way it actually is. Among ordinary people, jealousy is manifested quite intensely, but it also manifests itself among practitioners. Of course, the extent and the circumstances are different. When somebody practices better than you get unbalanced in your heart. Even among the directors of our assistance centers, certain individuals get unbalanced if they get replaced. Of course, most of them take it quite well. That's no good, some would say. I'm better than him. How come I got taken down and now it's him? Did I make you an official, or did I ask you to serve others? If you want to be an official, go be one at work and you'll make money too. Here, everyone is a volunteer. What's there to be attached to? You're putting in the effort entirely for the benefit of others. Some people took the flags home and wouldn't give them to others, as if they were given to you personally. They are for promoting Falun Gong. Who are you going to promote Falun Gong to in your home, right? This is obstructing us from promoting. How can you say you're living up to the practitioner's standard? Are you doing it right? Isn't that the issue? And some people, of course, there are very few of them in our school, very few such people, but it's quite severe in other schools. In other systems, they fight amongst themselves for money, they don't respect each other, and there's also strife between different systems. One curses another, then they curse back. It's a mess. Isn't all of it caused by jealousy? You're good, he's bad. You're good, he's bad. That's all ordinary people's attachments. All of it is being an ordinary person. What good is practicing Gong in that case? What good is practicing Gong? It's useless. Of course, this thing is very hard to get rid of. In cultivation of Tao in ancient China, there were also many people with this kind of attachment. Many of them. For example, storybooks talk about how Jiang Ziya was assigned by the original heavenly master to grant titles to deities. And Shen Gong Bao wouldn't put up with it. He became very jealous, saying, if my head were chopped off, I could put it back on my shoulders. And yet he picked this rotten old man. You ask him to do it and not me? And then he always made trouble for him. Even though this is just a story, it illustrates his point. Throughout history, there has always existed jealousy among disciples of the same master. This issue is very serious. If you cannot get rid of jealousy, you will never succeed in cultivation. In the past, if you talked about supernormal powers in a monastery, it was quite natural. When Sakyamuni was around, they talked about supernormal powers. Sakyamuni used supernormal powers. Of his 10 senior disciples, Mu Jianlian was thought to be number 1 in supernormal powers, and among his 10 senior female disciples, Lian Huase was number 1 in supernormal powers. There are many stories about them, but if you discuss supernormal powers in today's monasteries, they'll say you have cultivation insanity. Why? Because in the monasteries, those abbots and head monks, of course there have been many great monk masters throughout Chinese history, but it's been getting worse and worse. Each generation is worse than the previous one, and as it has been transmitted to the present day, it's even worse. So those abbots, head monks, and senior monks in the monasteries are not necessarily people of great inborn quality, they're just old, so it's their turn to take the posts. Those are titles granted by ordinary people, not by Buddhas. Of course, when one becomes an abbot, he's served by others, and he's well off. But the more he is served, and the more he doesn't put in an effort, the more he doesn't suffer, the harder it is for him to succeed in cultivation. But a junior monk who works at the stove and cooks the food is not necessarily a person of small inborn quality. You cannot base it on one's rank. The more he suffers, the easier it is for him to become enlightened. So one day he becomes enlightened, and monks from the whole monastery come looking for him to ask him questions. The abbot cannot stand it. How can I remain an abbot? That's no good. He'll get terribly jealous. How come he's become enlightened and I haven't? No, this won't do. He has cultivation insanity. Throw him out of the monastery. Force him out. Gradually, this led to the situation today, whereby if anyone talks about supernormal powers in a monastery, it's said to be cultivation insanity. So that's all I'll say regarding the issue of jealousy. It's a very serious issue. A lot of people in today's society, that is, when mankind has come to this stage, a lot of things are because of jealousy.
时间不多了啊。
There isn't much time left.
这个下面呢，我们讲
Next, let's discuss the relationship between illness treatment by hospitals and illness treatment by Qigong. Everyone knows that illness treatment by Qigong is the lowest level of cultivation practice. That is to say, a Qigong master is actually a cultivator. When a cultivator treats illnesses, it can work. A high-level cultivator can reach the level of dissolving karma. A low-level cultivator cannot reach the extent of dissolving karma, but he can push one's illness back. So you don't get it now, but you'll get it half a year to a year later or a few years later. Or when he pushes it far away, it will be transformed into other hardships. You don't have the illness anymore, but maybe your family will meet with some disasters, or it will transfer onto your relatives or good friends. There'll be this kind of problem. So usually Qigong masters who are still in the course of cultivation cannot reach the goal of dissolving karma. They can only delay the effect of karma or transform karma. Since a lot of Qigong masters all cultivate their paraconsciousness, they themselves don't know what they're doing, how it's done, how the illnesses get healed. All they know is that the illness is gone, and the patients also know that they feel better, that they don't seem to have that illness anymore. But they cannot really resolve the problem. Only someone who is cultivated to a very high level can truly solve this problem from the root. But be they high level or low level, over the years, these cultivators have cured a lot of people's illnesses and have made a lot of people healthy. That is well known to the public. Otherwise, why would there be so many people practicing Qigong? It's a popular activity that cannot be ignored. I'd say there are more than 100 million people now practicing Qigong. It's such a popular large-scale activity throughout the country that you cannot pretend it doesn't exist. You cannot deny it. Why do people believe in it so much? Because it really can attain the effect of increased fitness. In this existing physical dimension of ordinary people, they don't care where the illness is gone. They feel well now and they're more fit. So it can play such a role and attain such a state. That is to say, no one can ignore, no one can deny the effect that Qigong has had on people's health. However, there are some doctors who are rather stubborn and do not believe in Qigong. As soon as you mention Qigong, they'll say something quite hostile, quite unreasonable and unscientific. They say, if your Qigong can heal illnesses, what do you need us doctors for? That's what they say. That's quite unreasonable and also quite hostile. So some Qigong masters got choked off and had a hard time explaining it. Actually, in Qigong, when a cultivator is treating illnesses with cultivation methods, he is using things of a level of the Fa that is higher than, that is beyond the ordinary people, in order to heal ordinary people's diseases. That is to say, he intervenes in ordinary people's affairs. When a cultivator is doing these things out of compassion and on a small scale for individuals, for a few good people, and it doesn't have a large-scale effect in the society, that's not a problem. But doing it as a profession definitely will not bring any benefit. A true cultivator can do it for his disciples, and that's not a problem either. However, if this Qigong, if these cultivation things were brought out to the society and made into hospitals or rehabilitation centers, or if groups of Qigong masters were formed to treat illnesses, you would see that the effectiveness of its treatment would suffer a sharp decline. Usually the treatments work the first time around, but now they would become like hospitals. They would also require several courses of treatment and wouldn't necessarily be as good as hospitals. Why would this occur? Because it is not permitted that the state of ordinary human society be casually disrupted. Extraordinary Fa cannot be unconditionally unknowingly brought in to interfere in the ordinary people's fa. You want to casually mess up ordinary people's principles? This level is just something within this level of fa. For you to casually mess it up, how can that be allowed? That's the principle. So it cannot be used to establish hospitals. It cannot be done like that on a large scale. The peak of Qigong that occurred in the last few years was brought about by a special historical period, by special circumstances. That time has passed. That is to say, the fundamental reason is that Qigong cannot replace hospitals. It really cannot. But can it treat illnesses? Yes, of course it can. Because if one wants to bring a person to the state where he can practice cultivation, any and every complicated disease or illness can be cleared out of his body for him. That's how it is. So when something that high level, something that reaches such a high realm, is brought out to treat ordinary people's illnesses, of course it will have miraculous effects. But these things cannot interfere with ordinary human society on a large scale. Of course, there are some Qigong masters who say that hospitals cannot treat illnesses, that medicine is poison and surgery is murder. I say these words are also too absolute. Who knows how some people became Qigong masters? They like to make up definitions with only a shallow understanding. Of course hospitals can treat illnesses. If they couldn't treat illnesses, who would go to the hospital for treatment? Aren't things removed after surgery? You don't admit that it can treat illnesses? And taking medicine can actually have an effect. That is to say, hospitals can actually treat illnesses. But there is a point to be made. Why is it that a lot of illnesses cannot be diagnosed these days, and many illnesses can be diagnosed but cannot be cured? It's because even though the medical methods are on the plane of ordinary people, and they develop along with the progress of mankind's science, they cannot develop in a special way. But that illness is beyond the realm of ordinary people. Because as I said, illness is karma. Some karma is large, like a mountain, so it's very hard to treat. Some of it is fed as if through a pipeline. You cure it, and in a while it comes back. Those are hard to cure. They cannot be cured. So medical methods can only be like that. They're able to cure some illnesses and unable to cure others. So hospitals believe that illnesses should be treated early. When it's small, it's easy to treat. When it's severe, it's hard to treat. There is some truth to that. Speaking of treating illnesses, let's talk about Chinese medicine because it's directly related to Qigong. Nowadays, there are many institutes of Chinese medicine that practice Qigong. Be careful not to practice sham Qigong. They harm all their students. Chinese medicine played a great role in ancient China. And such great physicians as Sun Simiao, Hua Tuo, Li Shizhen, Bian Que, and others also emerged from it. Moreover, as seen from records in the medical texts, all these people possessed extrasensory powers. As I just said, ancient Chinese science was much wiser than the present scientific way that has come from the West and would have developed much more quickly. But Chinese people have a unique characteristic. They say, if I don't meet a good person, I won't pass my things on. I'll take it to the grave with me. Thus, artificially, a lot of things could not get out to the public, and gradually they will be replaced with the very, very practical Western things. Then they can only know the practical stuff. And now it's developing along that path, which I say is very slow. Ancient Chinese medicine was also, in the same way, more developed than modern medicine, more developed than modern Western science. Some people may not believe me and say that the modern medical means of treatment and diagnosis are so advanced, like taking a CT, bright supersonic scanners, X-ray pictures, etc., etc. Even diseases in your internal organs can be seen. I say, not necessarily. Right? You know, the records in the medical books show that great physicians like Hua Tuo, Sun Simiao, Li Shizhen, Bian Que, and others all possessed extrasensory powers. Their Tianmu or third eye could see the human body. Moreover, when one's level is high, standing right here and looking at a person, I can see the four sides of you from this one position, and I can also see your body tissues layer by layer, and I can also go through this dimension and see the root cause of illness in another dimension. Can your modern medicine achieve this? Your modern medicine is nowhere near it. Moreover, I bring this stuff of mine with me wherever I go, and it doesn't consume energy. Your equipment won't work without electricity. Besides, it's so bulky, you'd have a hard time moving it. And this thing just goes with me, so who do you say is more developed? It's the same when it comes to healing effects. When I was in the city of Chichihara, I saw a man pulling teeth. That wasn't deceiving people. He wouldn't have been able to con me. He had that big a pile of pulled teeth. He had laid a piece of cloth on the ground, and there was a pile of teeth on it. It was morning, and a lot of Qigong practitioners were coming from the park and came over to check out the fun. If someone had a bad tooth, they'd say, "Can you pull out my tooth for me?" He didn't charge anything for pulling teeth. He was mostly doing it to get people to buy his medicine. He had this small bottle of his medicine, some yellow liquid that emitted a very strong yellow vapor. So what did he do? Do you have a bad tooth? Which one? He would unscrew the plastic cap and put the bottle against your cheek, across from the bad tooth. Then he had to suck in air, suck it in through your cheek like that. After you sucked in a few mouthfuls of air, that yellow liquid medicine was not used up at all. Then he would close the bottle and put it away. Then, while saying how effective his medicine was, he would feel around. Feel around for what? From his pocket, he took out a box of matches and took out a single matchstick. Then he would lift the person's cheek. It had only been a little while at this point. Then he'd take out the matchstick, put it to the tooth, and with a light flick, the tooth would come out. Moreover, there was only a thin sliver of blood. There was no bleeding. He pulled teeth for anyone who asked. No one got sent away. He had such a pile of teeth there. I was amazed. I saw that the medicine was quite powerful. And he wasn't local, because you can tell Northeasterners, and he wasn't local. We're saying that a lot of things are being passed down among the people. There's still many good things. If you go to a Western dentist, you say Western medicine is advanced. If you go to a Western dentist to have a tooth pulled, it'll be bad. The instruments are shiny and electroplated with chrome. They even spin automatically with automatic belts. It's very pretty, and the chairs are very pretty too. But what does that count for? Let's look at its effectiveness, at its practical performance. You sit down there. You need to have a tooth pulled. Okay, how do you pull it? First, he gives you anesthesia shots, which of course cannot take effect instantly. Injecting the anesthesia hurts a lot too. One shot here, another one there. The injections make you scream. Anyway, in a little while, it's numb. Once it's numb, he pulls. You probably all know how it goes. He takes a big pair of pliers, real pliers, iron ones, and ka. He's yanking your tooth out. It's just pulling, nothing but pulling. But the tooth breaks, and the root is left inside. What's to be done about it? He takes a large iron hammer and a chisel, like a carpenter's, and bang. He tries to chip it out. Even if your flesh doesn't hurt, your heart does. You quiver and shake. With much trouble, he took care of that. And then he brings over this sophisticated instrument and begins drilling. Your nerves are drilling until you're quaking, right? And you still have to spit out big mouthfuls of blood. Then you go home, you have to recuperate for a while before you can come back for a false tooth. So whose do you say is more advanced? The first man just used a matchstick and got the tooth out with a light flick. Of course, this is not to put anyone down or to say that Western medicine is whatever, but that's just how everything is these days. I'm saying that ancient Chinese medical science was indeed very advanced. But conversely, when I say that ancient Chinese medical science was very advanced, I am not talking about modern Chinese medicine. The present-day Chinese medicine is a product of combining Chinese and Western medicine. The first graduates of the Institutes of Chinese Medicine were taught by doctors of Western medicine. Now their methods of diagnosis and treatment are those of Western medicine. Many methods are from Western medicine. Of course, we have some doctors of Chinese medicine sitting here. Don't think anything negative. What we're describing is a general phenomenon. The current Chinese medicine really is like that. No matter how brilliant you are, there is no 华佗李时珍 or 扁鹊. Chinese medicine has developed now and has been popularized and promoted, but its essence is criticized. And what's been passed down are just some experiences and prescriptions. Today, since we were on the topic, I just mentioned these things. That's all for today.